Tonight, President Muhammadu Buhari is in Daura for a 5-day official trip. That was after he left Malabo for a gas summit. The president has arrived at his country home. At a summit in Malabo, the federal government says it will soon commence the construction of the 600-kilometer Ajaokuta-Kaduna Kano gas pipeline, which would move gas from the southern part of the country to the north. President Muhammadu Buhari offered this assurance while addressing the 5th Gas Exporting Countries Forum Summit in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea. He adds that the viability of extending the gas pipeline to the North African region is also under consideration. A statement from the president's spokesperson quotes President Buhari as saying, "We are mindful of the energy deficit in the developing world, especially here in Africa, where we have nearly 600 million people without access to modern energy. As responsible leaders, it is our duty to preserve the environment not only for the present, but for the future generations." The president notes that the one-day meeting is taking place at a critical juncture when global energy supply is transitioning from hydrocarbons to renewables. Equatorial Guinea's President Teodoro Obiang Mbasogo declared a summit open, asked members of the forum to continue to work in harmony towards realizing its goals. Let's get a sense of the president's trip to Malabo, the gas pipeline construction deal, what this means for Nigeria. And of course, the president is in Daura and is going to be on an official trip for about a week. That's going to be for 5 days. I'm being joined on the program by this president's special advisor on media and publicity, Mr. Femi Adesina. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Thank you so much, Mr. Adesina, for joining us tonight on the program. First and foremost, let's get clarity on the president's trip to Daura. We understand that earlier today he arrived Daura after the Malabo trip. Is he going to be resting there? Your statement said that he's on official trip. What are his activities going to look like in the next 5 days?
Thank you. Good evening. Well, what I would first like to say is that Daura is part of Nigeria. And Daura is the country home of the president. So when the president goes to his home, you don't start asking him what he's doing there. But then saying it's an official trip means that on Monday, he's going to do some commissionings in Katsina State, or particularly of roads. He will commission a road project. There are 2 projects to be commissioned in Katsina on Monday. Then on Tuesday, he will proceed to Kaduna, where he will commission the Army Reference Hospital. And from there, he returns to Abuja. So if you count from today till Tuesday, that is the 5-day trip. It's official, but you have the weekend intervening in between.
Oh, that clears it, because, I mean, now Nigerians know what exactly it's going to look like there. So let's talk about the president's trip to Malabo. The president, in part of the statement from the presidency, did say Nigeria is more of a gas-producing country than oil-producing. In this sense, it means a lot. And the president did say that, look, the issues of hydrocarbons and the issues of renewables and what the emerging world that we're entering into requires, gas is going to play an important role. In that sense, give us a sense of what it means in terms of the construction of the gas pipeline the president talked about in Malabo. How much will this deal be? Who is perhaps going to be the contractor, and when will it start?
I can only talk about policy and not technicals. The technicals will come from like the NNPC or from the NLNG and all that. But in terms of policy, we know that Nigeria, under President Buhari, has always focused on exploiting our gas potentials. Nigeria is reputed to be the country with the largest gas potentials in Africa, and the 9th largest in the world. Yet, we only make money from petroleum because we have not developed our gas potentials to its fullest. There was a policy plan for Nigeria's gas right from the 70s. And the plan was that by 1983, Nigeria will already have 12 trains of natural gas. But today, almost 40 years later, we are still on train 6. It's only by next month that train 7 will come. So Nigeria is far behind in its gas policy, plans laid by the country itself. And the world is moving progressively away from fossil fuels because the world wants cleaner energy, of which gas is one. The world wants cleaner energy that will not damage the environment, that will not be deleterious to the climate. Therefore, there is more emphasis on gas rather than petroleum in the world now. That was one of the reasons why the Gas Exporting Countries Forum was set up. The meeting today in Malabo was the 5th in the series. It started in 2011 in Iran. 2 years ago, you will recall, the Nigerian president was at the 4th meeting, at the 3rd meeting in Iran. We were not there in 2017 because it's biannual. And this is the 5th meeting that held today. And as part of the plans to develop our gas and use it more to the benefit of the people, and as cleaner energy is that plan to build the pipeline from Ajaokuta to Kano and Kaduna, and Kano in the north, so that we can transport gas from the south to the north, so that the entire country has access to that cheaper and cleaner energy.
Mr. Adesina, when will this project start?
No, I think that is something that will unfold as the days go by. This is the first the country is hearing of it from the president today in Malabo. So that is just the first step, and the final details will come as to who will get the contract, who will build the gas pipeline, what are the timelines, what are the derivables from it and all that. The final details will come. It's just that today the president has unfolded that plan, and it's just the first step in what is going to be a long process.
Well, do you have an idea, quickly before we take our break on the program, do you have an idea whether the money to execute, because the way and manner the president presented it, it gladdens the heart of a lot of people who are in this sector, who understand the implication of or the importance of this gas construction and what it means for Nigeria. Do you have an idea whether or not the money is on the ground to kickstart this project?
Well, I'll just say Nigeria is not that poor. We may have challenges, just like the president said yesterday, what we earn from oil cannot meet the challenges we have, particularly in infrastructure, but we are not that poor. It does not mean that we want to do certain projects and we are not able to fund it. Even if the government cannot fund it wholesale, it may be PPP. There are many ways, many different ways to fund this kind of project. And like I said at the beginning, I may not be able to talk about technicalities now. That will come later.
If we look at what is on the table and how Nigeria can diversify this gas deal, a lot of people have said we have not really internalized and they are able to make the best of what we have in terms of the reserve and the potential Nigeria has in terms of gas. Perhaps one of the reasons the federal government said that Nigeria, going into that conference, Nigeria is more or less a gas-producing country, more than saying that Nigeria is an oil-producing country. So in that sense, Mr. Adesina, what are perhaps some of the future plans to key into what the president said today? Because that cannot be in isolation, the construction of that gas pipeline from the middle belt part of the country to the further stretch of the northern region of the country.
Yeah, thank you. Nigeria actually had a gas plan right from the 70s. You know, the president has lamented it a number of times that we didn't follow our own plans. So it's not as if we are just going to articulate a gas plan. No, it has always been there. It had been articulated since the 70s. And the plan was that by the mid-80s, 83 particularly, we will have 12 trains of liquefied natural gas that will be exported. But almost 40 years later, we are just going into train 7, which means we are far behind our own plans. Is that plan that is going to now be executed? In terms of articulation, the plan had been articulated. Execution was the problem, and that execution is what Nigeria needs to do. By next month, we will have the 7th train of the liquefied natural gas. And then from there, we can progress till we get to where we had originally envisaged to be. Not only would we export natural gas, we will also satisfy local demand. Natural gas is going to be cheaper for the people, cheaper than petroleum, and is going to be cleaner and therefore have better impact on the climate. You know, the world is conscious about the climate now, and every country has signed an agreement to cut emissions by a certain percentage.
All right, Mr. Adesina, quickly, if I apologies that I'm butting in. If I may quickly ask you, it's interesting that there are plans on getting more revenue through gas production, but is the president aware of some of the concerns of some Nigerians, especially some economists who believe that our borrowing agenda or the present government's borrowing plan is getting to a point that Nigeria may not be able to bear, especially on the back of the fact that yesterday the letter of the president was read on the floor of the Senate asking for what the deal to borrow more money, which was turned down in the 8th National Assembly. A lot of people are worried that we may be borrowing more than we can pay back.
Maybe those people missed a report that came from IMF 2 days ago. I don't know whether you saw that report, but the report said that actually Nigeria's borrowing was far below the capability of its GDP. That's the IMF report, that there was no cause for alarm. Compared to Nigeria's GDP, the borrowing was under perfect control. That's
even when out of almost 10 trillion, Mr. Adesina, out of almost 10 trillion, yes, we're paying back, we're servicing debt with almost 2 trillion. Is that still something that we can bear?
Does not remove the fact, that still does not remove the fact that our GDP can support the borrowing. As long as
you're looking at our GDP, but you're not. Look, analysts will tell you that you are supposed to look at the ratio of your revenue and your debt. If you look at that, why not look at that rather than look at the GDP to borrowing? Rather than, look at the ratio of your revenue to borrowing rather than look at the GDP to borrowing.
I'm not an expert in that area. I just depend on that report that came from IMF that I read 2 days ago, that there was no cause for alarm about Nigeria's borrowing. There are people that run this economy, and there are people that are knowledgeable. If they knew that our GDP couldn't support our borrowing, they would have raised some caution about it. But we continue to borrow because our GDP can support repayment. And IMF too has said there was no cause for alarm about Nigeria's borrowing because the GDP can support it.
That's Mr. Femi Adesina, the special advisor to President Muhammadu Buhari on media and publicity. Thank you so much for talking to us tonight on the program, Mr. Adesina. Well, that's our show for today, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Sean Wakimale. Bye for now.